everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the second Historical Romance virtual reading series. This is the second out of 5. If you've made it here, we're almost halfway through, so you've got lots to enjoy. I am the author of the Countess Chronicles series. My first book is The Ideal Countess, and I'm organizing this historical romance virtual reading series in anticipation of my first live event this October, Romancing the Gold Coast in Glen Cove, New York. It's a 3-day conference retreat where a bunch of authors are getting together to talk about why we love historical romance. We invite you as readers to come step back into time. We're going to be at a historical mansion doing historical romancy things, celebrating the genre. I am going to tell you more about the conference later on this evening, so stick around. But in the meantime, the whole series is designed to give you a flavor for who the authors are that you will get to meet. We will be there in person, in costume, some of us, and all of us will be really happy to meet readers and talk to you and answer any questions you have. So tonight we have a really great lineup. I hope you like Scottish historical romance because we've got lots of that coming your way. I'm going to give each author time to answer questions after their reading, so feel free to pop in your questions at any time in that live chat section of your YouTube. And we also have a couple of giveaways, so stay tuned. We're going to be giving stuff away. So to kick things off for us tonight, we have the lovely Nicole Locke. She writes medieval romance, and her series Lovers and Legends has been published with Harlequin Mill & Boone since 2015. So welcome, Nicole.
Hello. Hi. Oh my goodness. I'm here. Yay. I'm so happy. I'm live. How's everybody doing?
We've got people from Tennessee, New York, and even Rome.
Oh, I'll take that. I love Rome. Been there a few times. It's so much fun. The food. Always go back for the food. So yes. Okay. So I'm Nicole Locke. I do write medieval romances, but it's medieval in the sense that just take contemporary where you've got action and adventure and things are blowing up and there's car chases and all that dangerous stuff going on, and then just kind of move that back to medieval stuff. So we've got horses running and things are still being kind of blown up. Fires are being set. There's lots of danger in my little series that I've got going on. So I love contemporary. I love to read contemporary, but there's something about historical that calls to me. It's the urgency of the time, I think, because everything's just, your life is shorter. It's a little more precarious. And there's just that little bit of edge of danger that you don't have in contemporary life that I just fall in love with it all over again. So, and let's see, I guess I'm supposed to be reading. You want me to be reading? I just want everybody to know my new favorite word is called spuddle, and it's SPUDDLE. Got the word from Kathy Maxwell, and it's where you are frantically busy but getting absolutely nothing done. And that has definitely been my day today. So if I seem a little frantic and not quite so relaxed, although I do have a glass of wine here to help, that is the reason why I've been spuddling all day. I am going to be reading the little excerpt from The Maiden and the Mercenary. And if you all watched Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom back in the day, and there is a scene where his love of his life is drinking, having a few shots, and that's the beginning of this. That was the inspiration for the beginning of this. So the heroine is a little bit, no, she's way past tipsy. She's past tipsy. So don't take her, her verbiage and her behavior at this point as how she normally is. But, that's what we do. Okay, and yes, I have to have glasses on. So we're in France, 1297. But we could be in Indiana Jones, or we could be present day. So, oh, and I always love having different names. So her name is Beetaloo, like Beetlejuice, but Beetlejuice. Beetaloo. Beetaloo wiped the back of her hand against her mouth and concentrated on the tower of goblets stacked on the well-worn table before her. The chanting crowd around her and her challenger jostled for a closer position, and she shoved back. These hips of mine aren't moving for anyone. She brandished the goblet in her hand, and they all stepped merrily aside. I'll move your hips. Galen winked one eye, then the other, much more slowly. He's not winking. He's trying to focus through the haze, like her. Attempting to move my hips when drunken is how you first fell to misfortune, Galen. She pointed somewhere in the vicinity of his stack. Now let's see how you apply yourself with smaller goblets. As if you could be so fortunate, shouted Tess from the baking ovens. Someone clapped, and everyone from the wafer maker to the cupbearer howled, and the kitchens were normally bustly, but now even the doorways were crammed with field people. And the kitchens were as large as kingdoms, but even so, she heard a crash to her right as the crowd moved and several heads whipped around to see the destruction. She didn't, however. Any quick movement was ill-advised. How many gulps of ale had she had? She stopped counting after 20, trusting that the betting crowd had their own vested interest to keep track of the game. It was up to her to stack the goblets for each gulp of ale. She narrowed her eyes at the wavering mound. Were there 10, 20, maybe 25 gulps of ale, which meant Galen, the challenger, had also 25. Nope, he just threw back another and grabbed a goblet to stack on top of the tower he made. Damn him. His height and those arms that were twice as tall and twice as many, and as he had 4 arms, he has an unfair advantage to be sure. No helping, she called out as Henry sneaked a supporting hand to Galen's back when he staggered backwards. Henry lifted both his hands and she nodded her head at him in satisfaction. A mistake, which she fixed by widening her stance. If Galen fell, she won. And if Galen toppled his goblets before her, she won. And if she won, she'd win. She liked that part the best. Right now, she needed to win. It was important because she wasn't winning at anything else, and there was more at stake here. A roiling wave at her stomach as her thoughts darkened. She blinked hard, peering at the raucous crowd and the goblets she had stupidly assembled entirely too high. She needed to put another on the top. An easy task. And all the tasks were easy. Stack the goblets, drink the drink, and beat the brewer Galen, who reportedly hadn't lost a game of drink since he was a babe. That was a bet she could win because she hadn't lost a game of drink since she was a babe, and she was older than Galen. In fact, she was older than most of the servants in the Warstone kitchens. The only ones older than her were the ones already with babies and who lived in the village outside the fortress. She was old enough for a husband and family of her own, too, but she had been avoiding any such connections, entirely because of the village men who enjoyed manipulating a girl whose father had abandoned her, her 4 siblings, and their weakened mother. Dun, 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 dun. I know. So where does this book come in the series? Each book is a standalone, so you can actually pick them all up and you'll be fine. But there's a series of Lovers and Legends, and I think I'm finishing. Yeah, I just finished it actually at 1:00 this morning with the 14th book in the series. And just think of it as like a big tapestry where there's families and everybody's intertwined and getting married and there's children. And that's pretty much what all these books are about. So, not Everett. Louvre here is in actually 3 other books. And Beetaloo comes in just on this book alone. So he's got a backstory, which of course is all in this book, but also Beetaloo's got her little backstory too. And there's intrigue and there's danger, and there's nothing good that's happening at Warstone Palace. In fact, a lot of the scenes that are in this book will also be in a book that's coming out in September, because I wrote her sister, who's also at this fortress, her perspective on everything that happens in this book. And so that's kind of how I do it. It's hard to let people go once you meet them. So, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a really fun reading. I like the part where she wants to win because, well, she wants to win.
She'd win. She needs to. I mean, she's got to rescue her sister from the evil clutches of Ian of Warstone, who's in this place. So she's like, okay, she's in here. She's sneaking around. She's going to do some spying. And of course, Lube is not going to let her. So that's okay.
So what are you looking forward to as we come back to in-person events, and specifically as we kick off the inaugural Romancing the Gold Coast conference?
Seeing people again, visiting. I love to chat. I really honestly do. But there is that connection with people that I miss. I mean, I try to keep hold of everybody with, this and talking on the phone and everything. But there's just something about sitting down, having a cup of tea, a glass of Prosecco, or several glasses of Prosecco, and really getting to know people again.
Are you going to wear any costumes?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I've gained so much weight since COVID happened. It's horrendous. So I've been trying on the outfits I've had, but I'm like, okay, that's going to be really tight. I'm going to have to do something. So I've been buying other outfits, and they're not fitting either. So I'm getting a little bit like, I might just be naked. I don't know what I'm going to do, but yes.
We can drive a style.
Hey, that's a costume, isn't it? Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But yes, absolutely. Are you kidding me? I mean, I like the hats, the gloves, the whole gambit. So, but I like to wear like 1950s.
I love the 1950s. That's a good aesthetic.
Yeah, because then I get the big hats. So.
Awesome. Well, I know you have a giveaway for us tonight.
Yes.
About it?
Oh, well, yeah. It's gift card, Amazon gift card for $25. So, which is always comes in handy. I like to have them. So, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm doing my random number generator, and the winner is Gloria, who's with us from Rome.
Aha.
So congratulations, Yay. Gloria.
Yep, I can do that.
I'm going to follow up with you after the event to make sure you guys connect. And thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you, Gloria, for watching the feed.
Thanks.
All right. So I'm excited to introduce our next reader, Heather McCollum. Let me click the right buttons here. So Heather is a Scottish historical romance author. She has a really fascinating bio that I was reading up on that includes a degree in biology. And her website in general is a lot of fun. She has different sections that include an apothecary and a bedchamber. So I highly recommend you go over and check that out after listening to her read. So welcome, Heather.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me because we had a little bit of trouble at the beginning.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the great introduction. Yes, I write Scottish historical, mostly 16th century. So that's, Henry VIII's time period, but up in Scotland. And I just had a book come out, and it's called Highland Warrior. And I'm going to read you something from here. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the series. It's actually the second book in my Sons of Sinclair series, but they are all can be read as standalone. So you can start right in here with this story. But the first book in the series is part of my giveaway, and that is Highland Conquest. So the idea behind this series is that there's four brothers, the Sons of Sinclair, and Chief Sinclair lost his wife. He had these four sons. She died in childbirth with the last one, and he sort of went insane. And to him, it was the end of days. So he decided his four sons were the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And so he raised them that way, and he became a warlord, this father. And when he dies in battle, it sort of makes everything, all the brothers are lined up now to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So the first book is Cain, who is the horseman of conquest, right? And then the second book is Joshua, and he is the horseman of war. Now, Joshua in the first book is kind of a thorn in everybody's side because he was raised to start wars, right? He was raised to tease and pick and punch and always want to start fires and stuff. So when he gets to this book, though, we find out about what really makes Joshua tick. And what is surprising to the reader is that suddenly he does not want to war anymore. And the reader will find out why, because something happens between this book and this book And that's where it's a bit of a problem, because he's supposed to be the horseman of war, and he has gone up into the Orkney Isle, which is the island north of mainland Scotland. It is still Scotland, although the people there, the culture is more Viking, Norse. It was given to Scotland as part of a dowry, but the people there still spoke their Norn language and that sort of thing. But they had an overseer who was a Stuart. He was the illegitimate uncle of the king of Scotland. So he is up there, and he is a tyrant, Robert Stuart. And you can look him up. It's true. He is one of him and his sons. He and his sons were the worst tyrants in Scottish history, from what the records say. So he is up there, and Joshua had gone up there to train his men. When he's going to leave, because he's tired of Robert being the war idiot that he is, he gets stopped before he leaves by a woman that he meets, Cara Flett. Cara has become the brand new Orkney chief of the locals, and she's desperate. She's desperate to save her people, who Robert is basically enslaving to work on his palaces. Her people are dying out of hunger, cold, and being forced to work. So she asks, she knows that he won't just stay, this guy. He's on his way to leave. So she employs something that she doesn't know she can pull off, which is seduction. And she does pull it off because she's amazing. And she's a widow, so she's not a virgin. And so she tricks him into staying for a wonderful, wonderful night, and then tricks him into coming back to meet her people. And that is when Joshua realizes that he has been tricked. And when that happens, he gets very angry, because he says he says, "You don't know much about me," in this deep Scottish voice, of course, that I cannot imitate. But I do not like to be deceived. So anyways, so when she says, "Please, I need you to stay and to fight for my people," he says, "I leave at dawn," right? So her friend is there with her, and her grandmother, which is Amma in the Norn language. And she says, so this is where it starts, okay? Bloody hell. Cara reached up, sliding hands over her face to cup the back of her skull. Luring Joshua back to her den had been a risky plan, one of which she had quickly lost control. But I got him here. The horseman of war had done what she'd asked. If she were going to fail, Cara would do so after trying everything in her power to save her people. He is going to leave, Brenna said. Not if I have anything to do with it, she said, turning to her grandmother. Amma, do you have any of that sleeping draught I give to Gear when he cannot stop tossing from worry? Aye. Amma rose from her spot on the bed. She smiled. The lemon flavor goes nicely in honey mead. What are you doing? Brenna asked her, eyes wide. I am keeping him here until I can convince him to kill Robert and his spawn. So now we go to the next morning, or afternoon. Bloody hell, Joshua roared as he stalked naked around the small stone barn. Opening the door to let in a swirl of snow, he spied the sun through the heavy clouds. Even though the Orkney sun did not rise high this time of year, he could still see it was near the apex of its climb. He had fallen asleep after eating and drinking what Cara had sent to him the night before. She hadn't brought it herself, making him almost seek her out, but fury still ate at him. Fury at himself for falling for her tricks, and fury at her for being so damn clever and beautiful. A shiver tore through him, and he slammed the heavy door against the icy breeze and patches of snow tucked into the tall grasses. "'Tis the middle of the bloody day," he said. He had never slept so long before. It wasn't natural. "She poisoned me and took my clothes." He turned in a tight circle. "My furs, my sword, my woolen wrap, and my boots," he yelled, looking down at his bare feet, toes curling up from the cold ground. He was certain that he'd fallen asleep with them on last night, his tunic as well. "She must have poisoned me," he said low. The only scrap he had, besides the strip around his arm wound, was the flower-painted quilt she had sent, along with peat and a torch to light a fire inside the barn. He grabbed the blanket off the wool tick that he had slept on next to his horse Fuel and folded it around his waist into a mockery of a pleated plaid. It looked ridiculous, the brightly stitched flowers against his large form. He had never been deceived by a woman before, or a man for that matter. His brothers and he had played pranks on one another growing up, but he hadn't anticipated a trick by the lass. He had not anticipated her asking him to lead her people to their deaths in a futile fight either. Why the hell else would she have led you to her tupping den? Was it all just a farce to get him to stay on Orkney? Joshua's fist hit a hanging pail. The metallic twang loud in the quiet barn. Cracked, it fell to the earth with the force. Was there no limit to Chief Caraflet's boldness? He looked to Fuel, who had tossed his head at the explosive sound. "And you let her strip me naked!" The bay horse raised his hoof to scrape the stall door. "Damn woman," he said from between clenched teeth. He pushed through the barn door, and the icy wind of the desolate landscape stole his breath. Stalking, completely naked under the blanket, his damn bollocks pulled up higher than when he had to swim in a frost-edged loch, Joshua strode across toward the hill. The bottoms of his feet burned with cold as he crunched through the thin layer of snow and frost, his fury the only thing heating him. Down the other side of the slope he saw a lad who looked like the one who had grazed him with the thrown dagger outside the tavern. The boy ran into the door of the underground cottage where he'd left Kara standing with her family last night. She better be in there, along with his clothes and Sinclair's sword. He jogged down the slope and stepped through the door. The heat from the central fire washed over him, but what stopped him from moving farther inside was the crowd. The very short crowd. All of them sitting on the floor, perfectly quiet and still, except for a few who wiggled in place. "Joshua and Sinclair?" Kara's voice shot toward him from the doorway of the bedchamber. "Meet the children of Hillside." Joshua swallowed down the curse on his tongue, glaring at Kara. She met his gaze unabashedly and then nodded to the one little lass who stared back at her. The child looked to be about 5 years old. Curls framing her round face, the wee one came forward holding a jar. "Jam from my mum," she said, tilting her chin high. He stood still, unsure what to do. With a determined frown, the child shook the jar before him. Joshua forced his fist to relax enough to unfurl his fingers and take the jar. The little girl flashed him a smile and turned, sitting back down among the throng. There must have been 20 children in there, perhaps more. A lad stood next, serious in face, with a wooden sword strapped to his side. "For your mighty horse," he said, handing Joshua a turnip. "I heard he is fond of them." Joshua nodded and then focused on balancing the vegetable on top of the jar. Next stood an older lass with a knitted woolen scarf. She walked toward him, her arms extended. "I made it," she said, giving him a shy smile. One by one they rose, each one of them handing something to him in some sort of tribute, until a pile of wool, dried flowers, food, and painted stones balanced against his bare chest. He would have lowered them to the ground, but was afraid they'd topple, and the loosely tied blanket covering his loins would fall. When the last child sat, Kara crossed her arms over her chest, her feet braced in a battle stance. "I thought you might want to meet the children who will be forced to work on Lord Robert's new palace this spring, without pay, without food, without the ability to say no." He held all the little gifts in silence. Kara clapped her hands together once, and the children stood as if they'd rehearsed this attack on his conscience. They formed a line to leave, each one stopping before him to curtsy or bow. "Please stay," the little girl who brought the jam said. "I can help with your horse," the turnip gifting lad said. "I can knit you another plaid in wool," the older girl said, giving a curtsy. "I think you are the strongest person alive," said a little lass with wide eyes. "We need you on our side." "Take us to victory," said a boy who was just shy of being called a man. "I will fight with you." The smattering of freckles over the bridge of his nose brought a hollow twisting to Joshua's stomach. The boy had no idea of the ghosts he conjured within him. All the children plucked at Joshua's resolve. He looked up at Kara, knowing it had been her plan. He frowned, his gaze rising to where she maintained her stance in the bedroom doorway. Her brother Osk peeked up by her shoulder along with the younger lad who had been waiting outside, apparently on guard. Kara did not look smug nor victorious. She looked damn determined. She whispered into the boy's ear. Who was the lad who kept watch for him? The boy frowned but strode forward around the line and headed back out into the cold. As the last child exited, Joshua stood there, arms full, meeting Kara's gaze. You used children to sway me. His words were tight, his anger reined in. She exhaled. You need to understand what I am fighting for. It was because of children and the weak, the ones hurt the most by the misery of war, that Joshua had sworn to stop fighting ongoing, constant battles that only wore down each side until one was weaker and surrendered. A war with no winners was brutal and cruel, one he would not fight. And damn it, Kara was asking him to do it again. And that is from Highland Warrior.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
How do you integrate research of like real characters like the Stewart family with your fictional characters?
Good question. I do a lot of research and I try to intermix them. So like I was going to show you this at the beginning, I forgot to, but I collage my stories before I write them. And so this is actually, can't see, it's backwards. This is who I envision Joshua to be. And there is, I can't do it backwards, Kara is the blonde right there. Kara's there. Anyways, so on the back here, you can see that I have these little chicken scratch notes, right? That's some research. Those are part of the mounds of research. And I will work in who is related to who. And then when I make up a character, I put them in with a star next to them, because I don't want to rewrite history, you know. So I really do try to integrate it and make sure that my villains are alive, that they haven't died yet, that they may get taken to court, which Robert does get taken to court by his nephew, who's the King of Scotland at the time. So I try to make sure that all jives together. It's like a big puzzle, and it all sort of comes together. And that's what gives me a thrill. When I go and I look up something, a real fact, and it fits into my puzzle just perfectly. And that, I'm so excited.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any favorite tropes that you like to read or write?
Well, I love the enemies to lovers because it is born conflict. It is from the get-go conflict. And that is the trope that's prevalent in this first book. Okay. So that, I guess, would have to be my favorite. I like mistaken identities, and I've done marriages of convenience, which turn into a whole kerfuffle of drama. So anything, I really like to have dialogue and witty dialogue and snappy things. And so I try to start from the get-go. You know, like I had one book where the heroine's coming to take the castle she bought and her brother bought, and the hero, who is the Highland chief, is still there because it wasn't sold, it was taken. So there's an instant, mistaken problem there. So it's not really an enemy to lovers, but it's close. So I love that starting conflict right off.
Yeah, that's great. And one of our viewers is asking, have you been to Scotland?
Oh, yeah. Well, I say, oh, yeah, but I've only been there twice because I was supposed to go last year to Orkney Isle, but that got canceled. So my husband has Scottish heritage, so McCollum is my real last name. And so I feel like I've been there a lot because I'm constantly learning about it and touring it virtually. The last time I was there was about maybe 5 years ago. And this time we're going to go, I'm doing a book signing in Paris. I'm very excited next April. So while we're over there, we're going to go over to Scotland because I can't leave that area of the world without going and touching some 13th century castle walls.
Absolutely. I have really appreciated during COVID how many museums and historic landmarks have virtual tours, so you can still get a little bit.
You can get a little bit, but you can't feel it. You can't smell it. I can't roll around in it.
Yeah.
I tried to do all that when I'm there.
Now I'm picturing you going into dungeons and just rolling around.
Yeah, just kind of rolling around. Well, it's funny. One of my favorite castles is Kilkern Castle, which is near Oban on the west coast, near to go over to the Isle of Mull and Skye. And I go there every time, the 2 times I've been. Okay, so I will be going again. But my husband went with me and my son the last time. And of course, they had 13th century toilets, which were just holes in this, like for the soldiers. And of course, 2 boys, they had to act that out. Of course, there was no one else there. It is ruins in the middle of nowhere. So it wasn't, bad, but.
Yeah. And
my giveaway, did you want me to tell you? I'm sorry, I'll let you.
Well, I was just going to ask regarding Romancing the Gold Coast. Do you have any special costumes planned?
Yes, I'll have my Scottish lady costume, and which I love to wear because it reminds me of my heroines. And then I have a Jane Austen kind of dress that my mom's coming too, and she is one of the dressmakers for me. So we made our own hats and turbans and our big fans. So I'm really looking in reticules. So we're going to wear our dresses together. And I may bring one more, but it's awfully big and I have to take a plane. So we'll see. But it's a 16th century English court dress that Victoria Vane made for me. And it is stunning. So I'm going to try to pack that if possible.
Amazing. All right. Well, please do tell us what you have to give away.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and give away the first book in the series. But again, you can start with the second book if you want. They're standalones. But Highland Conquest. And because, these are warring brothers, I have here a Scian Dubh, which is that's Gaelic for like black-handled dagger. And they used to keep them on themselves. You can see them in the socks in modern day. It's really a letter opener. That's what it is, so I'm not sending you weapons. I'm sending you a letter opener. The interesting thing about a Scian Dubh is that it only has a blade on one side, where a matchless, I can't pronounce it. It is really made to be a weapon, so it has a blade on both sides. So this is more of a utility knife that's used for like scraping hides and things like that, or opening letters. So I'm going to give away that with the book, and then I have some fun swag, like a fun little magnet that says "Kilts for heroes who need extra room."
I like it. All right, so I'm doing our random number generator, and the number is 9, and the winner is Gina Johnson. So congratulations, Gina. I will connect you and Heather afterwards.
Now, Gina, if you're the person in Rome, then I will gift you a digital book because I can't afford to ship it over there. But in the U.S., then I would do up a box to send with all that. So.
Yes, we'll follow up afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Heather.
Yeah,
this has been really wonderful.
All right.
Coming up, we have Kate Bateman and Kathryn Lynn Davis. So I'm really excited to welcome them later. Right now, I'm going to take some time to tell you guys a little bit about Romancing the Gold Coast, because I've mentioned it a couple of times and you might be wondering what it is and why you should be interested. So I'm going to share my screen. Great. So this is going to be the inaugural year of Romancing the Gold Coast, and it is started by the amazing Kimberly Rocha, who is joining us tonight on the live stream. So Kimberly, feel free to put in the comments if I get anything wrong. And the vision for Romancing the Gold Coast is that it is waltz back in time for authors and readers to connect about our shared love of historical romance, and to spend a few days kind of exploring the different tropes of romance in real life. Get our hands dirty, as Heather said, roll around in romance. So it is this October. It was supposed to be last October, but we pushed it out because of COVID. So we're really excited to finally get to do it. October 21st to 24th in Glen Cove, New York. And if you don't know, Glen Cove is on Long Island, and it's on the northern shore in the general part of Long Island that inspired The Great Gatsby for all the beautiful historical houses. So it's definitely going to make us feel like we are stepping back into time. So a little bit about the mansion. It's called the Mansion at Glen Cove, and it is very swanky. These are pictures of the exterior where you can see it really gives you that English country house feel. And it also has an amazing interior. I'm really excited to just like step into these halls. I can picture a duke and his duchess coming down those red lined stairs, and maybe a ball taking place in the wood paneled drawing room. And as we are there, the first main event is that you get to meet some of your favorite authors. And I pulled some pictures that Kimberly shared. This is the first Romancing the Gold Coast conference. So these pictures are from different conferences, but they show you the community that Kimberly has created with all these different authors that she's bringing to New York for us so that we can celebrate together. And as you've heard, there are definitely going to be some costumes involved. So a couple of the marquee events you can look forward to include a fancy high tea party, which will have also what I'm really excited about is a live harpist in addition to the tea. So we can really feel like we're zen and talking to each other in a fancy English tea room. And there's also going to be a costume ball to cap things off. In addition to that, Kimberly has all sorts of activities planned, including speed dating with your authors to get to know each other, book signings, historical crafts, masquerade mask making, Georgian bingo, Regency card sharps. And the final thing is the masquerade ball. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to go. Like I said, this is my first in-person conference, and I think it's going to be the best one to start with because already just organizing this reading series, the authors have been so kind and so welcoming, and there's such a sense of community, and I can't wait to take that in person and meet readers and talk to all of you about why we all love historical romance. It's important to note, the registration deadline is July 15th. This summer. That's 1 month from yesterday. So if you're considering it, make sure to consider it while you're coming to these readings and then book your ticket. And if you have any questions, you can email Kimberly or ask them right now because she's on the live chat. So that's a little bit about the conference. And as we prepare for Kate and Kathryn, I'm just going to make sure that I have answered all the questions you might have. All right. I'm going to do a little bit of a reading now. I mentioned that I write Regency romance. I write historical romance. I write specifically Regency. And my first series, The Countess Chronicles, I published the first book, The Ideal Countess, in January 2020. Since then, I have published the full series. It includes 3 full novels and 1 short story. So I just thought I'd read a little bit of the beginning of the whole series to give you a flavor for it before we move on to Kate and Kathryn Wynne Davis. So I don't think this requires too much setup because it's literally the beginning of the book. But I can tell you that I decided to write this after binge reading a lot of Mary Ballow books and a lot of Sherry Thomas. And I loved it so much that I just said, you know, what if I wrote it? And my background is I've been writing my whole life. I had a degree in creative writing, and I had been living in New York trying to figure out what I wanted to do writing-wise. And I was trying to write serious women's book club fiction that took on serious themes. But I was reading all this romance, and so I decided, what if I tried writing romance? Maybe that would bring me more joy. And out of that came The Ideal Countess. So here is the opening chapter. Miss Alice Winpole's first ball was almost everything she had dreamed it would be. There was the footman at the door, bellowing ancient family names so she could peer over at the viscounts and barons and even one duke as they entered. There was the string quartet in the corner that never played a note out of tune, unlike the overeager fiddlers her mother hired for their country parties. The instrumentalists featured an olive-toned violinist who Alice was sure had been imported straight from Milan. There were ladies swathed in precious silks and gentlemen in their richest suits. Couples young and old slipped through double doors for fresh air on the Romanesque patio. Alice's mother had even whispered that there were orange-flavored ices in the refreshment room. For a first ball, it was surpassing all of Alice's expectations, which were quite considerable since she'd been hearing about the splendor of the season for the entirety of her 17 years. The ball was perfect in every way except one. Alice had not yet been asked to dance. Her parents, the Baron and Baroness of Eastleigh, had coached her on this. For the exact same amount of time that Alice had been hearing about balls, she had also been happily ensconced in their country seat of Blenacle Manor. While her father undertook the 5-day journey to London a few times a year, it was far too long, and far too likely that a coach wheel would break and the ladies would be stranded in a one-room inn, for him to invite the family along. Her mother had warned Alice that since they were so remote in their corner of the north, it would take a few weeks to properly introduce Alice so that gentlemen could ask her to dance. Alice had been fully prepared to stand against the wall during her first ball, for 1 or 2 dances. But things were not going according to plan. Alice and her mother were supposed to have arrived a full week before this first ball of the season, thrown by the Marchioness of Leicester, so that her mother could take Alice around on morning calls to meet the matrons of society. But first, a wretched rainstorm had delayed the start of their journey by 2 days, and then on the highway through Nottinghamshire, a carriage wheel did break. The carriage maker in town was laid up with what Lady Eastleigh called an unmentionable disease, so they had to wait another 2 days for the fix. By the time Alice set eyes on London, loud, messy London, there had been barely enough time to present her to the Queen, much less anybody else. And so Lady Eastleigh and Lord Eastleigh had deposited Alice against the very wall where she still stood, before melting into the crowd to find her some dance partners. Playing the part of marriage mama, Lady Eastleigh chatted with fellow matrons, angling for introductions to their sons or nephews or brothers, in hopes she could then introduce said gentlemen to Alice. Lord Eastleigh, meanwhile, had decamped to the cluster of males in the card-room, promising to send every eligible male her way. Alice had more faith in her father. While Lady Eastleigh was pretty and polite, she didn't have many connections, and she far preferred chatting over tea to rubbing elbows with London's ton. In the ballroom, she was being relegated to the quietest of conversation circles. In contrast, Lord Eastleigh knew more people in London, and he was the type of friendly, boisterous that made people want to like him. Many times at home, Alice had observed a tenant or laborer coming to Papa with a complaint, only for the man to leave laughing with a compromise as a solution. Yet, despite her parents' efforts, the caller had already announced the first minuet, a quadrille, and a polka, and Alice remained with no introductions. She glanced at her dance card as fellow debutantes walked arm in arm with gentlemen to begin the polka. At the start of the evening, she had written her name at the top in her brightest lettering, excited to see the card fill up. Now, there were only 8 more dances until supper, and every line was still blank. Indeed, the card itself was beginning to shrivel from all her fidgeting. Soon there wouldn't be a way for gentlemen to claim a dance, even if they wanted to. Alice peeked at her fellow wallflowers. There were 5 or 6 lined against the wall. At first, Alice had tried to make conversation with them, in truth tried to make friends with them, but apparently the fate of the wallflower insisted on no conversation. The other ladies were almost all older than her, one of them surely over 20, and wore dim colors or long faces. The one farthest from Alice had even pulled out some knitting. Surely in her new peach pink gown, Alice stood apart. She kept her body angled toward the dance floor, a hopeful yet demure expression on her face. Certainly, any observer must see that she didn't belong with the wallflowers. Soon she would have an introduction, which would lead to another, and before she knew it, she would be the talk of the town. If she had been back at Blenacle Manor, this wouldn't be a problem. Even if no one asked her to dance, Alice would simply march up to an available gentleman and ask him herself. But in London, everything was different. She was here as a member of peerage, to find a husband of good standing, and so she would act every part a lady. The polka came to an end. Alice tried to look happy for the dancers as they laughed and clapped and turned to their next partners. There was absolutely no way, under any circumstance, that she would acknowledge the knot in her stomach, the one that got bigger and sorer every second she remained unnoticed. She was the daughter of Lord Reginald Wimpole, Baron of Eastleigh, and she had no feelings except pleasant ones. In fact, Even if the whole ball passed and she spoke to no other soul, she was determined to enjoy it. Alice was so set on enjoying the ball that she didn't even notice a man approaching her until he was right beside her. "Miss Wimpole, what a delight to see you here this season." Lord Hugh Osborne, Earl of Windermere, their neighbor to the south by 20 miles, bowed before her. Somehow, instead of jumping out of her skin in surprise, Alice managed a responding curtsy, as if she spoke to gentlemen at balls all the time. Of course, she had spoken to Lord Windermere at balls before, since he was always invited to Lady Eastley's Christmas balls. She had spoken to his lordship at meals, too, and on horse rides, and even one time shared a coach with him and his mother. A few years older than she, Lord Windermere was the type of boy who barely saw past his own glasses. He was always reading a book or sketching inventions on spare paper. The last time she had seen him, a few years ago, before he went off to Cambridge, all he could talk about was his belief that England could prevent a revolution if only they invented new farm tools. Terrible Alice, in fact, had wished him well at university and whispered as he'd walked away, "Don't come back." Yet now Lord Windermere was the best thing she had ever seen. His hair was longer, the color of chestnut, and curling as a frame to highlight a sculpted face, sloping cheekbones, slender nose, and eyes that were a piercing blue even through his thick round spectacles. He seemed to have grown a few inches, too, and his shoulders were thicker, stronger. In her haze of gratitude, Alice found him so handsome that her breath caught at the base of her throat. He was commenting something about the ball, and she completely missed it. She smiled to make up for it. Lord Windermere's eyes darted to the blank card in her hand. "Do you, by any chance, have this quadrille available?" I'll stop there for now. Thank you very much. All right, so I am so excited to introduce our next reader, Kathryn Lynn Davis. Kathryn is I'm just clicking the right buttons here. Kathryn is a New York Times bestselling author of Scottish and historical romances. And she is joining us here, and she's going to read from her 2014 novel, Too Deep for Tears. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you, Heather. I'm happy to be here, and I'm delighted to read from this novel, which was sort of my breakout novel, and because it's set in Scotland, which I dearly love. Scotland is the home of my heart. And this is a scene, this is in Glenafric in northeastern Scotland, and it's Beltane, which is May Day, and the characters who are participating, the entire Glen is participating, and they're dancing around the fires of Beltane. So I'll just continue. We have the main character Ailsa and the main character Ian with one visit by another character. So Ailsa danced, mesmerized by the blaze that melded past and present, light and shadow, until there was nothing but the moment, the radiance, this flame of reckless abandon within her and without. The fire rose, terrifying and magnificent, beautiful beyond words, but not beyond feeling. She raised her skirts and twirled barefoot over the tamped down grass. She sang to herself, exulting. Ian caught her hand and they whirled together while perspiration covered their faces and the glow of the flames lit their eyes. For that hour, as she responded to the demands of the fire that ruled them all, she felt she was part of the Celtic glory that had disappeared long since into the darkness beyond these hills. Tonight, when she looked up at the stars, caught each in its own white silence across the night sky, she knew that miracles were possible. The dancers paused and held their breath, so suddenly still that they might have been a ring of stones at an ancient Druid temple. Shadows they were, flickering yet unmoving, frozen with waiting, burning with heat from the bonfires they circled. Slowly they began to sway, releasing their breath like a rush of warm wind against the cold mist. Now they danced wildly, fiercely. The last of their inhibitions had been consumed by the flames. I also whirled, breathless, moved closer and closer to the fire, tempting it to reach out and draw her into its white-hot center. When the hem of her dress caught the edge of a flame, she fell out of the circle. She laughed and rolled in the dew-wet grass until the fire was out. She lay for a moment, too exhausted to rise. Then she felt a presence nearby. She looked up to find Jenny Mackenzie staring at her in terror. "Are you all right?" Ilsa took her friend's trembling hand. "Don't fret over me. 'Tis happy I am this night, and happy I shall be forever." Jenny was taken aback by the laughter. "You're no afraid of anything, are you?" Ilsa frowned. "What is there to fear?" She noticed as she spoke that Ian had come to join them. He knelt beside Jenny, who could not stop shaking. "Loneliness," Jenny replied, "and darkness and storms and the wind on the mountains." She turned to look at the dancers spinning frantically in the weird light. "And these people, look at the fire in their eyes." Her own hazel eyes were wide with dread. She shuddered and looked away. Ian put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "There's nothing here to be afraid of, Jenny. These are the people you've always known, the ones you played with as a bairn, who laughed with ye and tumbled with ye on the moors. They're having a bit of fun is all. 'Twill no hurt anyone." Later, everyone passed between the two fires in the traditional rite of purification. But Ian had been chosen to perform the sacred act that would cleanse them all of sins for the year to come. He would leap across the fire 3 times. Ilsa's heart began to beat more rapidly with a sense of anticipation that had grown in her since dawn. Ian backed away, trying to judge the distance he would need to clear the low-burning fire. Ilsa watched him with pride and fear mingled. It was an honor to be chosen, but not all managed to escape unharmed. Ian ran from the shadows into the light, reached the edge of the ring, and leaped across the fire to land with both feet on the far side. A cheer went up, and several people patted his back and applauded his prowess. If he succeeded in the next 2 tries, all would have good luck for the rest of the year. Ilsa's eyes glowed and her heart pounded. How magnificent Ian had looked when he rose above the flames, a moving star that blazed for an instant, then fell into the darkness. She felt his exhilaration and wanted suddenly to share it. As Ian backed away on the other side of the ring, Ilsa found the place where he had begun the last jump. He took a deep breath. So did she. He raised his head. She raised hers too. He began to run, gathering speed as he went. Ilsa also ran. At the same instant, his feet and hers left the ground on opposite sides of the fire. Encouraged by the shouts of the other revelers, the 2 young people leaped high. Ian's eyes widened in surprise as he passed Ilsa, legs extended, arms spread to the open sky. Then the 2 landed together safely, the flame still between them. The cheers rose around them like thunder. "Again," Ian called above the other voices. "Again," Ilsa replied. Slowly, inch by inch, they moved backward until they stood equal distances from the bonfire. They stared at each other, eyes locked. They began to move forward. This time they ran faster. so fast that Ilsa gasped for breath, but she did not falter. Then they leaped, meeting in the center above the flames. To those who watched, the two seemed to hover for an instant, suspended in time, plaids streaming behind them. Simultaneously, they raised their hands and brushed palms, then plunged downward and collapsed, laughing in triumph on the two sides of the circle. All the revelers joined hands again while Ian made his way to Ilsa's side. He did not speak, did not need to. She read the approval and pride in his eyes. It was just then, as it had been in that instant when they stared at each other, palm to palm, poised above the flames. They stood alone in the center of the ark, and around them all was darkness without meaning or light.
Thank you so much. That's a really evocative reading.
I tend to write kind of visually, even and emotionally. Those are my two main. And of course, when it's set in Scotland, all of those things come out very strongly because I feel the earth and the sky, and of course those flames are particularly compelling.
Yeah, we were talking with Heather earlier about how she's visited Scotland twice. Have you visited Scotland very often?
Yes, I have been there 3 or 4 times. And each time I went, I had a place I had already written a book about, and I had photographs and I had a drawing, especially of Glen Affric, and we stopped at a hotel in the next glen over because we couldn't find the way into Glen Affric, and we were asking the host about Glen Affric, could we possibly get in? And he said, well, as it happens, it's closed and chained, but I own it. So if you'd like, since you're our guests, I'd be happy to take you in tomorrow. And he took us in, and my husband had seen all of the photographs I had and the images and read the things I had written. And he looked all around and he said, you've been here before.
Wow.
I mean, this fits exactly everything I've read and everything seen. So it happened like that on every trip I took. It was as if I lived in Scotland. So that's why the bond is so strong.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what are some of your favorite tropes to write now that you've written a lot? So do you find yourself returning to the same tropes?
I really don't think about tropes. I just I wanted a book that was set in Scotland, China, and India, and an editor said, can you combine them? And so I thought, we went to a bar one night, don't tell anybody, but we went to a bar and had several drinks, and by the end of the night we had figured, oh, let's see, we'll have a British diplomat because they went to all those countries, and each heroine will have 3 books in the book, and each heroine will be a daughter of the British diplomat. And so that was how that happened. And I didn't even know the word trope until maybe a year and a half ago. I just kind of wrote, I didn't realize, I'm sure I was using them, but I just didn't realize.
Yeah.
That they were coming from tropes. Now I understand that, but
yeah. And what are you looking forward to about returning to in-person conferences and being part of the inaugural Romancing the Gold Coast?
Well, one thing is I met all of my author friends at conferences before I was online. And now I've met many more, and some of whom I haven't actually met in person. And I look forward to the camaraderie and meeting the readers. And it's just been a long time of huddling behind my computer. And I really, the social aspect is great. And I find meeting readers is always wonderful, whatever they have to say. And sometimes it's good and sometimes not, but it's always interesting and you always learn.
Right. It's important to always just keep hearing feedback and using it to learn and move forward.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So we also have some giveaways to end out the night. Kathryn, Lynn, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. Do you have something that you wanted to give away?
Yes, I want to give away an e-copy of Too Deep for Tears.
Oh, great. Oh, let me put that back up on the screen. All right, so we've got an ebook of Too Deep for Tears. Let me do my random number generator. 33. Come back to my spreadsheet. All right, Sharon Lewis is the lucky winner of Too Deep for Tears. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kathryn. I will connect you and Sharon after this to make sure that the prize gets delivered. And I am raffling off again the ebook bundle, my entire Countess Chronicles series. So that's 3 full books and 1 short story. I'm raffling off that entire series as an ebook bundle. So the random number is 27, and that is Bridget Shippey. So I will follow up with you, Bridget. Thank you so much. Save. Well, thank you so much, Kathryn Lynn. Thank you to Heather McCollum and Nicole Locke earlier. And thank you to all of you for coming and joining us tonight. This was the second of our 5 historical romance virtual readings. The next one is next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have 5 authors on the docket, including, let's see if I can do this by memory. We've got Angeline 14, Alyssa Alexander, myself, Monica Burns. And I should have looked it up, but there are 5 authors, and I'll follow up with all of you to make sure you know who they are. It's going to be the release day for my new series, The Prestons, and I'm going to be reading from that. And that release is a completely free novella. So be sure to tune in to hear from it and hear how you can get it. Romancing the Gold Coast is this October 21st through 24th. Registration deadline is July 15th. So if you have any questions, let me know, let Kimberly know. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I hope to see you next week. Take care.